We're stronger. We don't need them. That's what they said. That's what they believed. And that belief just triggered the biggest economic mistake America has made in decades. For years, Washington has treated Canada like it's just another American state, a cold neighbor up north, a place we grab resources from whenever we want. The thinking was clear. America is the giant. We have the buyers. We have the power. If things got tough, Canada would give in. But on this Sunday morning, January 25th, 2026, everything changed. The friendly neighbor just hit back harder than anyone expected. 2 days ago, President Trump signed Executive Order 109, a massive 25% tax on everything Canada sells to us: oil, wood, metal, all of it. The goal? Force Canada to give up control of their own resources. The White House thought Canadian leaders would rush to Washington asking for mercy. Instead, something nobody saw coming happened. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, or whoever leads now, didn't just fight back with taxes. He did something far more extreme. He stopped the exports completely. He used emergency powers to ban shipments to the United States. Right now, as I'm talking to you, the oil pipelines are being shut down. The trains bringing fertilizer to American farms have stopped at the border. The uranium we need for nuclear power, grounded. And America's economy isn't just slowing down, it's collapsing. Gas prices in the middle of the country jumped 80 cents in one night. The Chicago grain market had to stop trading because farmers are panicking about fertilizer. And Texas, the energy giant, just got a warning. Their power grid is in danger, not because of weather, because the fuel refineries need isn't coming. In this video, we're going to reveal the truth about America's so-called energy independence. We're going to show you why the United States is completely dependent on Canada. We'll break down 3 key resources: heavy oil, uranium, and fertilizer, that are about to cripple the world's biggest economy. This isn't just a trade fight anymore. This is economic war. And for the first time ever, America is the one getting surrounded. Let's start with oil. To understand why the White House is panicking right now, you need to know something most people don't about oil. We've been told for years that America doesn't need foreign oil anymore. We drill in Texas. We pump millions of barrels every day. We even sell oil to other countries. So why does it matter if Canada stops sending us oil? Here's the secret nobody talks about: the oil mismatch. The oil we pump in Texas is called light sweet crude. It's thin, clean, easy to work with. Great stuff. But here's the problem. The huge oil refineries we have, especially along the Gulf Coast, weren't built to handle that kind of oil. They were designed decades ago to process heavy crude. That's the thick, dark, sludge-like oil that comes from places like Venezuela, Mexico, and Canada. These refineries are like giant machines. They spent billions of dollars on equipment built specifically to break down heavy oil. If you only give them light Texas oil, they can't run properly. They operate at maybe 60% power. They can't make enough diesel. They literally start breaking down. For the last 5 years, since we stopped buying from Venezuela and Mexico's production dropped, America has relied on one source for heavy crude: Canada. Canada sends us nearly 4 million barrels of this heavy oil every single day. It flows through pipelines like Keystone and Enbridge. It's the fuel that keeps American industry moving. When President Trump added taxes to Canadian energy, he thought he was hurting a competitor, but he was actually choking America's own supply. Canada didn't just accept the tax. They made a smart move. For years, the U.S. blocked pipelines that would let Canada ship oil to the Pacific Ocean. Why? Because if Canada couldn't reach the coast, they had to sell all their oil to us at a discount. That discount saved Americans billions every year. But last year, Canada finally finished a major pipeline to their west coast. Now they can ship oil across the Pacific. Yesterday, Canada's energy minister announced a deal with China. China's state oil company has agreed to buy every barrel of oil that America refuses to take. Ships are already heading to Vancouver to pick it up. So what happens to the American Midwest? The Midwest gets 70% of its refinery oil from Canada. 70%. Without that oil, the refineries in Illinois, Ohio, and Minnesota will have to shut down. You can't just suddenly ship Texas oil up there. The pipelines don't run that direction. The whole system was built assuming oil flows from north to south. We're looking at a situation where gas stations in Chicago, Detroit, and Minneapolis could run completely dry within 72 hours. Not expensive gas, no gas at all. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve, our emergency backup, is mostly filled with a different type of oil. It can help a little, but it can't replace 4 million barrels a day. And even if it could, that reserve is stored in the Gulf, not the Midwest. The arrogance of "we don't need Canada" ignored basic geography. We built an energy system that assumes the border doesn't exist. Now that border is a wall and the system is breaking, if you think empty gas stations are bad, wait until your electricity bill arrives. The United States gets about 20% of its electricity from nuclear power. It's reliable. It runs day and night, even when solar and wind can't. But here's a scary fact. The United States produces almost zero uranium. We import 95% of the fuel our nuclear plants need. Where did we used to get it? Russia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. But in 2024, Congress banned Russian uranium to punish Putin. That left us with one major trusted supplier, Canada. The Athabasca Basin in Saskatchewan produces some of the highest quality uranium on Earth. Canadian companies keep America's nuclear plants running. When the trade war started, the White House assumed nuclear fuel would be protected. It wasn't. In a move that shocked military leaders, Canada declared uranium a national security asset. They've paused all export permits to the U.S. pending a security review. This is checkmate. Nuclear power plants run on fuel cycles that last 18 to 24 months. They don't keep huge stockpiles lying around. Some plants need refueling this spring. If they don't get the fuel, they have to shut down. If we lose 20% of our power grid right before summer, we're looking at blackouts across the East Coast. And unlike oil, you can't just buy uranium quickly. It has to be mined, processed, enriched, and shaped into fuel rods. That supply chain takes years. Canada knows this. They know that without their uranium, the U.S. Navy's aircraft carriers can't operate and the lights in Washington go dark. This is Canada's hidden power. They don't brag about their military, but they control the fuel for ours. The U.S. Department of Energy is frantically trying to find uranium from Australia and Namibia, but the shipping and processing infrastructure isn't there. And guess who's been buying up African uranium? China. By pushing Canada away, we might push them to sell this critical resource to our rivals. Imagine Chinese nuclear reactors powered by Canadian uranium while American reactors sit dark because of a fight over lumber taxes. It's strategic insanity. Energy keeps us moving. Uranium keeps the lights on. But this next resource, this one keeps us fed. Let's talk about potash. It's a pink salt. You've probably never heard of it, but if you eat food, you depend on it. Potash is the K in fertilizer. Potassium. You can't grow corn, soybeans, or wheat at large scales without it. Without potash, crops get weak, yields drop, food supplies collapse. The world has three main sources of potash: Russia and Belarus, sanctioned and unreliable. Canada, specifically Saskatchewan. Everyone else, tiny amounts. Saskatchewan alone produces almost 1/3 of the world's potash. But more importantly, it supplies 85% of the potash used by American farmers. 85%. We have no backup. There are no massive potash mines in Iowa. When Trump added the 25% tariff on Canadian minerals, he effectively taxed every bushel of corn grown in America. But Canada didn't just make us pay the tax. They stopped the shipments. The Premier of Saskatchewan, working with the Prime Minister, has stopped rail shipments heading south, citing supply chain concerns. We're weeks away from spring planting season. Farmers across the Corn Belt are sitting on their tractors staring at empty storage barns. They need that fertilizer now. If they don't apply it in April, there's no crop in October. If Canada keeps the potash for just 30 days, we miss the planting window. Crop yields could drop 30 to 40%. Do you know what that does to food prices? Corn feeds cattle. Soybeans feed chickens. The price of beef, chicken, milk, eggs, and bread will double. This is the breakfast tax, and we did it to ourselves. Analysts are already predicting a $15 Big Mac by July if this isn't fixed. Canada, meanwhile, has all the fertilizer they need. They can sell their extra food to the world at record prices while American farmers go broke. The irony is painful. The tariffs were supposed to protect the American farmer. Instead, they're taking away the one thing farmers need to survive. For 100 years, the U.S. and Canada have been like family. We argue, but we're stuck together. Washington assumed Canada had nowhere else to go. They share our border. They speak our language, they're trapped. That might have been true 30 years ago. It's not true in 2026. This morning, Canada's Trade Minister announced the Pacific Gateway Initiative. They're cutting regulations to speed up natural gas terminals on the West Coast. They're fast-tracking mineral exports to Japan, South Korea, and yes, China. A report from the Royal Bank of Canada calls it the dependency trap exit strategy. Canada is realizing that being 70% dependent on the U.S. for trade is a national security risk. They're willing to suffer a short-term recession to break free. This is the Pentagon's worst nightmare. We rely on Canada for NORAD, the radar stations that detect Russian missiles over the Arctic. They're on Canadian soil. We rely on Canadian aluminum to build F-35 fighter jets. Canada provides 70% of U.S. aluminum imports. We rely on Canadian steel for our tanks. If Canada decides to become neutral, if they say we'll trade equally with everyone, suddenly the U.S. military has a massive problem. We can't build jets without their metal. We can't fuel them without their oil. We can't detect incoming threats without their land. The free trade agreement, it's effectively dead. We're back to 1930s-style protectionism. But in the 1930s, America was self-sufficient. In 2026, the U.S. is a specialized economy that needs raw materials, and we just went to war with our supplier. So how does this end? It ends with a phone call. It ends with the President of the United States calling Ottawa and backing down. Because the math is clear. We can hurt Canada economically. We can damage their GDP. We can cause a recession in Toronto, but Canada can stop our cars. They can starve our crops. They can turn off our lights. A nation rich in resources can always outlast a nation rich in consumers. Canadians can burn wood to stay warm and eat their own wheat. Americans can't eat smartphones. This trade war has exposed the weakness of the American empire. We expanded our power globally, but forgot to protect our own neighborhood. We treated our closest ally like a servant, and now we're paying for it. The "we don't need Canada" movement was a bluff, and Canada just called it. As markets open Monday morning, watch these three stocks. Cameco, ticker CCJ for uranium, Nutrien, NTR for potash, Exxon, XOM for refining. If those stocks are moving wildly, the crisis is getting worse. We'll likely see the White House announce a temporary exemption within 48 hours. They'll call it a goodwill gesture, but we'll know the truth. They looked at the empty gas tanks in the Midwest and realized that in 2026, geography still matters, and we're stuck with each other. Thanks for watching. If you want to protect your money from this crisis, check the link below and hit subscribe, because the next disaster is hitting the U.S. auto industry, and what's happening in Detroit right now will blow your mind. Let's go even deeper into the aluminum crisis, because this is what's keeping military planners awake at night. Most headlines focus on oil, but the invisible crisis is metal. Aluminum is frozen electricity. To make it, you need bauxite ore and enormous amounts of cheap power to run smelters. Canada has Quebec. Quebec has hydroelectric dams. It's the perfect aluminum factory. Companies like Alcoa and Rio Tinto run massive smelters north of the border that supply the U.S. manufacturing sector. Ford F-150 trucks, Tesla frames, Boeing planes, SpaceX rockets, and armor plating for military vehicles, they all depend on Canadian aluminum. The U.S. produces only a tiny fraction of what it uses. Our electricity costs too much. We shut down our smelters years ago. When the tariffs hit, the just-in-time supply system of the auto industry broke. Ford has factories in Oakville, Canada, and Detroit, U.S. Parts cross the border 7 times before a car is finished. With a 25% tariff on each crossing, there's no profit left. Ford and GM have already announced temporary factory shutdowns. That means thousands of auto workers in Michigan, a critical swing state, are being sent home without pay. The United Auto Workers Union is furious. They're protesting in Washington, not Ottawa. They know this trade war is destroying their jobs, but the defense angle is even more frightening. The Department of Defense released a report in 2025 saying that secure access to Canadian aluminum is essential for national defense. If we have to buy aluminum on the open market, we're competing with China. And Chinese aluminum is dirty, made with coal power, and hit with sanctions. We've effectively cut off our only clean, secure source of the metal we need to build weapons for the next war. This is the autarky delusion, the belief that America can do everything alone. We can't, not anymore. The supply chains are too interconnected. The systems are too complex. Trying to separate the U.S. and Canadian economies is like trying to separate conjoined twins with a saw. You might succeed, but you'll kill the patient. And finally, let's talk about the third rail, water, the Great Lakes. We share them, but Canada controls the northern flow. For years, the dry southwest of the U.S. has wanted Canadian freshwater. Plans to pipe water from Manitoba to Nevada. Canada has always said no, but in a trade war, no becomes a weapon. There are treaties governing rivers like the Columbia. That treaty was up for renewal. If Canada decides to keep more water on their side for hydroelectric power, a perfectly legal excuse, the water levels in Washington state and Oregon drop. The Grand Coulee Dam loses capacity. The Pacific Northwest, home to Amazon and Microsoft data centers, loses power. Water is the ultimate resource, and Canada has 20% of the world's fresh water. You can't print that.